So let's talk about what's going on in the culture. Okay, Trump and Hegseth deny knowledge of follow-up strike on drug boat. Okay. Um, you know what? We're going to paint a little bit more of the picture after the fact. I'll let Q do that for us. You might have a vague familiarity with the goings on with the Department of War bombing and striking boats in the Caribbean. We famously covered a story in which one of the victims of these attacks was purported to be a fisherman and lost his life because of this. And there's been no proof, no evidence to suggest that these were indeed drug smugglers, whatever. So that's a little bit of the backstory, but I'll share the current state of things, and then we'll hear from you, Q. All right, this is from CNN. President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Tuesday sought to distance themselves from the decision to launch a follow-up strike on a suspected drug boat in the Caribbean, insisting they weren't aware of of what the military had done after the first strike didn't kill everyone on board. During a cabinet meeting, Trump told reporters that he was not consulted ahead of time and that even months after the strikes, he had not yet been fully briefed on the circumstances surrounding them. Sounds about right. Trump added that he was relying on Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to keep him apprised of the situation and that Hegseth was satisfied with the September attack. But Hegseth on Tuesday also denied any direct role in targeting the survivors, saying he'd empowered Admiral Frank M. Mitch Bradley to make all of the operational decisions and had left the room well before it became clear that some of the people on the boat had survived. The defense secretary did not learn about the second strike, he added, until hours later. Both Trump and Hegseth defended Bradley's actions as correct and within the administration's legal authority, with Hegseth vowing that the administration would, quote, have his back, unquote. But the efforts to place responsibility for the second strike solely on Bradley, the commander of a U.S. Special Operations Command, come amid intensifying scrutiny from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle over the legality of the strike. Some have even suggested that it amounts to a war crime. And Trump has previously said he wouldn't have wanted that, not a second strike. That's a direct quote from him, by the way. Hegseth's account on Tuesday also raised questions about his initial description of the strike in its immediate aftermath when he said on Fox News that, quote, I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in the boat. We knew exactly what they were doing, unquote. Democrats have long criticized the administration's operations in the Caribbean as reckless and unwarranted, arguing that Trump has overstated the threat posed by the alleged drug vessels and offered little evidence that any of the dozens killed in the strike so far warranted such action. So obviously this is problematic. Congress has the ability to declare war, and yet these are acts of war. They're taking place internationally, targeted strikes, and they are focused on Venezuelan citizens. And it's obviously a heavy-handed approach, and Venezuela is not the only place drugs come from. Indeed, there are drug dealers in federal prison that Trump is pardoning. We talked about that recently as well, too. So, Q, your thoughts here.
You know, there's an interesting thing happening. As you just mentioned, these strikes are supposed to be about stopping drugs while the country simultaneously pardons. Let me backtrack. There's no proof or even any evidence that these boats that are being destroyed, like vaporized by missiles, have drugs on them, had drugs on them, nothing. But a person who not only is there overwhelming evidence of them having smuggled and contributed to the trafficking and smuggling of drugs into our country, convicted and sentenced heftily, like heftily is what I meant to say,
Yeah.
is being pardoned by the same administration. Funny how that works.
Yeah.
And that's not the wildest part. And this should concern everyone that can hear my voice. We now have multiple major news outlets reporting that during the so-called drug boat operations off the coast of Venezuela, that there were two strikes, not one, two. The first strike hit the vessel. The second, according to witnesses and individuals directly involved, was ordered after survivors were visible on the wreckage. I'll repeat that because sometimes I stutter. After survivors were visible. And now Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump both want us to believe that they had no idea the second strike happened. They're invoking the classic fog of war, couldn't see through the smoke, didn't know what the admiral was doing. We only saw the first hit. But here's the problem, as is typically the problem with stories and lies that come from this administration. All you have to do is press a little bit, and their stories completely fall apart.
Travel, yeah.
The same officials who were in the room, the people actually communicating the orders, are saying the opposite. They are saying Hegseth watched it live. They are saying the communications were clear. They are saying survivors were spotted. They are saying somebody made a deliberate decision to follow up with a second strike, designed not to stop a threat, but to eliminate witnesses.
If I may, I want to, because I recognize that there are a lot of people that are like so lost in the sauce and they're so whipped up into a frenzy that they are not seeing the humanity of anybody who's not a white American, right? These people exist. They listen to our show and they try to stress me out in the comments, but I post in ghosts and don't read that stuff. But I know you exist, right? For you who say, good, they should have killed them. That way they don't reoffend. I want to make what Q just said live a little bit more. There's a person named Juan Orlando Hernandez. He was the former president of Honduras who admitted to his drug crimes. He was in federal prison in the United States of America, was pardoned by Donald Trump. This was within the past few days that this became headline news. I'm not sure exactly when the pardon took place, but you know, we talked about this recently enough. Okay. So if Donald Trump has such a hard stance on drugs, his hyperfixation on Venezuela is crazy, but because drugs don't just come from Venezuela, but him also on the back end pardoning drug dealers who might also reoffend, right, is problematic. I got one more point, but go ahead, Q.
Important to point out, because that's a separate thing from this story. That's just kind of anecdotal that gives it some color. The thing about this story that makes what I said worse, the administration could very easily prove what they're saying, right? They refuse to release surveillance footage, drone logs, action reports. If everything was clean, you release all that stuff. We know what happened. Nothing to see here. Instead, they're going to throw this admiral under the bus. And this pattern of using power and violence against the powerless with impunity continues, right? If you can kill nameless people in the Caribbean Sea, then lie about it and just blame it on smoke, Rams, there's no law left.
That's what I was going to say next. So we do have a process for this. You don't know who was on that boat. You don't know if they were on that boat against their will. That's why we have trials. There's international courts. There's courts in the U.S. There's courts in their home countries. You prosecute people. You prove things with evidence. This is why we don't have mob rule in this country. In theory, I guess the mob now is MAGA, but in theory, we would not have mob rule in this country. There's laws, there's orders, there's processes that we're supposed to adhere to keep us from devolving into a society that just cannibalizes itself ultimately. And we're abandoning that with this administration. So